Good evening, good evening, good evening. We're gonna start this off a little bit differently. We're gonna start it with a statement. Chester, we got we got hundreds of faith institutions that collectively own millions in property and serve thousands every single week. So why hasn't that translated into like a housing development or a business incubator or a single youth pipeline that actually keeps kids off the corner? Today, we're going to ask Chester's religious institutions, churches, and mosques stop actually operating in silos and let's build something together. It's not about to be a feel good moment. It's not about to be photo ops. We talking about a real coalition with some real money, with some real development. We got one city, one mission. And with that being said, I'm Andrew Nelson here with my brothers, John Pierre Bryce here, and we culture uncut.
Man, this topic is extremely loaded. So I'm gonna let the brothers that have talent with artillery, you feel me, start this off, right? I myself, I was in, I was Christian. I was raised Christian, Catholic. Um, I spent a little bit of time in the Jewish synagogues. Um, I became Muslim in 1995, and that has been
Dad.
my um, my religious
Dad.
journey. Um, I know it
Daddy.
makes sense for religions to come together to create, because that's where all our energy is put. But I'm gonna let you two guys do your thing, and I'm gonna sit here and take notes.
I mean, so my background is fairly similar, right? So I grew up in a Christian church, specifically a Baptist church. Man, I'm talking about going to church every day of the week. My mom had Bible study, choir rehearsal on Monday. Me and my siblings had choir rehearsal on Tuesday. Wednesday we was at Bible study. Thursday we was at step and dance practice. Friday and Saturday sometimes was a break. Sometimes we was going in Saturday for the men's breakfast, and then Sunday service, wash, rinse, repeat, right? And then I joined the Marine Corps, and then when I was in the military, I was going to all different kind of churches, trying to find a home church wherever I was stationed at. And one day I started really doing like an inventory of my information, and I realized I'm like, man, I've been in church my whole life, but I am very much spiritually and intellectually, as far as like theology, an infant. I knew very, very little. So I was like, oh, I got to fix that. And it really put me on a path of studying, reading the Bible, reading the Quran, also reading the Torah and the Talmud, and looking at historical progressions of how religion changed and shaped throughout different cultures and timelines. And where I've landed at today, I am what the theologians would call a follower of the way, right? I absolutely acknowledge and follow the practices and the teachings of Yeshua HaMashiach, and very, very much close to my heart. And at this time, I acknowledge and understand that there is so much more to the Abrahamic religions that connect us than divide us. And that's where I landed. I've had conversations with you about this plenty of times, and I'm really excited about this conversation because I think that this is going to get us with the ball rolling of getting back to where we should have been and where we for real all started at, right? Because let's be honest, whether you call yourself a Christian or whether you call yourself a Muslim, which translates to believer in God, by the way, right? Or whether you call you whatever, right? If you acknowledge an Abrahamic religion, we worship the same God, right? The religions just really change how we pray and what doctrine we acknowledge, more or less. And my position at this point now, doctrine is largely man-made. I'm gonna shut up so my brother Nas can talk.
Yeah, man. Well, you hit on a lot of stuff. I'll just start with my background with religion. I grew up in the church. Our church denomination when I was growing up was CME. We actually went right there in Twin Oaks to St. Matthews.
Okay. Yeah.
My entire
Now,
life.
Pleasant was my home church, so we was like right there, like literally same block. I could
Yep,
throw a
yep.
block to your church. Yeah.
And I was in there. You know, it was Sunday school before church. It was the choir, and being the only boy for the most part, mine was like one or two, and you in the choir. That means you in the kids choir and you in the adults choir.
For
You
sure.
know what I mean? You got
Yeah.
to double up.
Your tenor before you even went through puberty.
so I spent a lot of time in the church, and then
Yeah.
they keep you involved. You got the extracurriculars going on. Shoot, I was even there Saturday nights making the pamphlets to give out on Sunday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely spent a lot of time in the church growing up, and then as I got older, started to lose my way. And it's funny because you mentioned being in the military, you were trying to find your church home.
Mhm.
Same exact walk. Uh, I moved out to Texas. I was trying to find a church out there. Couldn't really find one the first time I was out there. Um, and then when I went back the second time, I landed on a church that I started going to pretty regularly. But in the midst of all that, I was doing my research. While you were talking, I was trying to go through my books because I did go through that faith walk where it was like, is Christianity the religion that I am supposed to follow? And so, like, I got 12 major world religions book. Then I got Hinduism book, and I got the Great Mythologies of the World book, and like it just kept going on. And then I landed personally back on Christianity and like knew that my walk was there. So I started reading more books about the Christian faith and like discerning the voice of God. And so it's interesting that everyone goes through. If you fall off, you have to go through this reawakening.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say, based on what you guys are saying, right? Like, I think when you really boil it down, when you look at all these religions, there's so much similarities, but we're forced in like our humanistic way of thinking that like I got to lean in on the differences as opposed to the things that are the same. Um, and I think that's the biggest thing. That's where we falter.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that that's why this is really good, right? So focusing on the common ground that we're ignoring. So a lot of people comes with their own theories, right? And but I'm gonna address what I can see that is relevant to most of us. Right? It's not a secret that empire has had their hand in manipulating all religions to whatever extent, right? And that it was through crafty translation and through legislation that gives government funding and boxes in and boxes out what pastors can and cannot say when they take said government funding. The end result, in my opinion, is that it has been shaped more or less so that way the delivery can serve the will of empire. And the goal of empire is to have control, right? And you can't control a people who has knowledge of self and who has a foundation and an understanding. So you have to divide them. You have to change their perspective. And I think that that's where we lost our way more or less as a people. So what I really want us to focus on for the next 10 or 15 minutes, if we can, how much we are really connected in spite of, I'm gonna make this statement again, how we go about praying, right? So I want to talk about a little bit of Christian history and Islamic traditions as far as, you know, how they have deeply rooted and documented historical traditions of community and economic development. And they overlap way more than people think and know. And we got to get into that because if we start providing that awareness, then I think that that will help break down these barriers, these man-made, less empirical boundaries that have been built up. Because the reality is that we shouldn't be letting a small concept as doctrine divide us to the level that we divide us, because that leaves us all left without. So let's talk about the role of churches, right? So the one that everybody understands and remembers on how they talk about how during the Montgomery bus boycotts, the churches were the ones who were organizing and providing, uh, like services to get people where they needed to go, right? Whether it be school or whether it be work, that they utilized the churches as a central organizing point. And that was like really the foundational tool that helped propel those bus boycotts that lasted well over a year, right? Because
Yep.
back then they understood that you can't boycott for a day and expect economic impact, right? They knew that they needed to dig their heels in and dig those trenches in and actually start making a significant difference where it could be felt economically, right? And I believe that government got real crafty and learned their lesson and was like, hey, we're gonna see to it that this system is in such a manner to where that can't happen again. Another part, there was a case study in Harlem. It's called the Abyssinian Baptist Church. They built an entire development corporation, right? It was called the Abyssinian Development Corporation. It was established in 1989. They handle housing, they did micro enterprise lending, they did community building, they built schools, the Thurgood Marshall Academy, they built Head Start programs and senior housing. They invested over $1 billion in development to change the shape and the trajectory of the Harlem that they was living in. Other side of the country in Seattle, there was a historically black churches launched the Nehemiah Initiative, which was a community-based redevelopment approach. This was a lot more recent. It was organized in 2018 by Brother Donald King, also Bishop Gary Tyson and Aaron Fairchild, and they used church-owned land to build affordable housing and community serving development while pushing back on displacement. Now, P, if I could trouble you to help me with these words, because I'm gonna butcher them because they Arabic words, right? So I want you to help me out and correct me.
I don't know why you think I can speak Arabic. I can't
You
speak
right,
Arabic
you right, touche.
as
Well,
much as
I'm
I
my
want
best.
to. Like
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
try
keep
my
it
best.
fun. Like
No, I
I
appreciate
would,
it.
I could tag somebody in it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, so that way we can get the correct pronunciation. But I'm gonna try my best while we here, right? So, but Islam, you already know they, from what I can tell now, that Islam follows the tenets of relationship building that go all the way back to old style Old Testament and the way that Israel lived before during back all the way back to the time of Abraham. So there is the framework, I think it's called Mushakara Partnership and Mudarabara Partnership, which is partnership and profit sharing, right? And these are Islamic frameworks that's designed to foster partnership and mutual support within the community. Now, anybody with eyes can see that any Islamic um, temple inside of a community, all of the people that go there, they commune together and work together, build together, and they have the sense of community a little bit more buttoned up than I see when I was growing up in church. And a lot of times in church, if you wasn't one of those key church members, you see your people on Sunday, and then we go and disperse to the winds, and then I see you again next Sunday. And then there was a handful of people that were actively involved and was there regularly that I would see. But very rarely, in my experience, did our work actually spill out into the community. And then another key framework, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word, but it's WAQF. And that is an Islamic endowment system. It's described as a powerful community supporting institution, providing infrastructure, social health, educational programs. It promotes job creation, production, consumption, and reduces spending on public goods, lowering tax burdens, increases savings, private investment, and economic growth, right? And then just a little bit to touch on as far as like the Torah and the people who practice Judaism, they also function within the community. They have rules where you can't even charge another Jewish individual interest. Like the, even the Bible that we read talks about usury and how it's wrong. Um, and also in the Old Testament, there's teachings that say that we suppose that when you own land and you grow fruit, you supposed to leave 10% of your fruit on the vines for people to be able to live and eat, right? We're not going to do the work for you and pull it off, but it need to be accessible for you because the land is for everybody. all three religions show tenets that promote culture and community, right? But for whatever reason or somehow we lost our way. And I just really kind of want to position this and say, like, what if we really checked our practices at the door and put the focus as community where we all in the same Chester, right? We all got this same 4.8 mile city that we living in, that we raising our children in, that we building our businesses in. And even if you've gone away and did other things, it's still your home and you still got a heart for your home, right? And I can relate for that because when I was in the military, I was gone 10 years, but I still was
Can I
coming back every chance I got, right? Because
can I
home is home. So what if we changed our perspective and was like, yo, right, let's work together in spite of our differences in doctrine. Let's focus on how much we have in common. And especially since the common ground is all like we all have tenets within our core religion that says community, profits above people, right? Relationships. That's the real focus. I know a lot more firsthand about the Bible than I do about the Quran, but I also know that the tenets are very similar. We got 10 commandments, right? And 6 out of 10 govern on how we engage with each other. That matters, right? Um,
I,
and go ahead.
I think well, a lot of things went through my mind while you were talking.
Okay.
But I think the main thing that is a bit troubling is we focus as a community. And when I say as a community, I mean our culture, right? The African American culture. We focus too heavily on the indoctrination of any organization than the belief or the message thereof from the organization, right? And so when I think about, at least for my upbringing, right? When I think about true Bible believing Christians, where like I am 10 toes down on this, they've gone through something in their life and it brought them back to the realization that Jesus is the King of Kings or the Lord of Lords, right? And then when you look at the Islamic belief for the brothers that I am friends with that are walkers in the Islamic faith, they are indoctrinated through that process through community, right? Mm-hmm. Someone's reached out to them and held them through the storm, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have two factions. One's believing I made it through this because God held me down. And not to say that Islamic people don't believe in their God. Of course they believe in Allah. But while they were going through their storm, they leaned heavily on a brother. Generally, when I listen to their stories, they're like, this brother helped me through it, right? And so they lean heavily on community. When you look at the Chester population, there's so many people in Chester that grew up as Christians, and then now when you look at them, they're practicing Islamic belief. I don't have any qualm against it, but we have to acknowledge that the aspect of community is what they're leaning to. And it's not to say that community is not there within the Christian faith. It's navigating the religious practices around the Christian walk, right? Because older believers in Christianity tend to want you to walk a narrow line the way that they believe you should walk, as opposed to coaching. And I think that's the main differentiator.
Right.
But bringing it back. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was agreeing. Go ahead.
Bringing it back to community, it makes me think about Dr. Claude Anderson, though, right? Powernomics. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of concepts when you talk about powernomics, but the base itself is that you have to believe in what the end result can be.
Right.
And so that's why I like to tie religion into it, because whether you are practicing Islam or practicing to be a Christian, there is a deeper belief and a higher understanding that the road can be better by working together. For sure. And so this notion that like Christians can't necessarily work with Islam, it's like, have you read the Bible, right? Have you right. really got into your Quran? Because at the same time, like from a Christian's understanding, if you read the first half of the Bible, right? But before you even get to Jesus, right? If you read the first half of the Bible, you know the road gets tough, but through community and through Jesus, you will get through it. And so I granted I haven't gone through the Quran, right? But from my understanding of it, the beliefs are almost identical. I think the shift happens at Abraham. Am,
I
am
mean,
I, am I
that's the beginning of the shift because Abraham had two sons, right?
exactly
But more specifically, the real change in doctrine comes where modern day Christians view Jesus as God and Islam views him as a prophet.
right?
But what I really want to focus on is for this part, because community is key, right? So the reality is that Jesus had 12 disciples. If that ain't a community, I don't know what is, right?
100%.
Furthermore, Jesus was absolutely a socialist, not a
Mm,
capitalist, and was not a person that was pushing individualism any way, shape, or form whatsoever.
mm,
And that's a period, not a comma. You don't believe me? Go read it. I can challenge you. All
mm,
five of the gospels are lying there.
mm,
hmm Flat out, right? So the reality is that Christianity and Islam, as far as the religious teachings are, push community through and through, right?
mm.
But somehow the modern day practice on how we play out in Christianity got changed. Now that's another story for another day that I don't really want to get into.
Mm.
But what I will say is, caveating on the community thing, one thing Chester got is a bunch of churches
A bunch of them.
and mosques, right? And then a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations that are faith based, right? So what if we took all of that land and all of those congregations and just literally compounded that power, right? Because now you got a group of people who understand falling under moral authority, right? And then we started saying, okay, let's utilize that collective common ground as a way to start building financial frameworks that really are rooted in partnership, right? And rooted in profit sharing and getting back to that concept of perpetual community investment. Imagine if we were able to take all of those resources and again check this concept of doctrine at the door, because we all know that regardless of where we differ on doctrine, we all agree with community, right? Because that's the real truth. We are
To
so much aligned there. Go ahead.
to that point, man, I think the way that it's achieved is setting up a council where these religious leaders are on this council together and they are all seen as equals, right? And so through the council, right, we can bring the community together. And I hope that there's a religious leader out there watching this and they're like, yes, let's initiate this council.
Yes,
Because the end result is community, and bringing together the leaders of said communities will make it a larger community. The footprint will thrive, and you can make a framework towards a common goal. 100%.
absolutely. All right, so cool. So now we established that all of the traditions have the foundation and the tools. So now my brain, the way it thinks analytically, I'm like, all right, well, does it really ever work when you put them together? Right?
Hell
And
yeah, it works.
evidence of it work. Say it again, P.
Yeah, it works.
Hell yeah, it works.
Hell
Right?
yeah, it works.
And you know my nerd self. I got some research to back it. Right? So Interfaith, America's Black Interfaith Project highlights some of the most inspiring crossing of religious boundaries and most meaningful moments of interfaith cooperation in American history. They came out of the Black experience. Yet much of what we think of interfaith cooperation has emerged from principally like other spaces of other communities and or the Black spaces that act where this has worked, where we've done these things in our community, has been underrepresented. So now I want to go and kind of like represent that a little bit. So in New York City, they had a partnership of faith that brought together Jewish, Christian, and Muslims together to unite their voices on behalf of justice, peace, and healing. It started in 1990 as a response to the urban violence that was uprising with Rodney King and yeah. Now, of course, the Rodney King was on the West Coast, but as a result of the way that they were seeing it, they all worked together in New York and put together a partnership and a coalition, right? They there was multiple studies on the interfaith community initiatives, and they found that inter-community peace building and community engagement provides a fruitful structure for building relationships, fostering diversity, and even increasing civic participation. In Omaha, there was a Tri-Faith initiative. They built a 38-acre campus. They had a synagogue for the Israelites. They had a church called Countryside Community Church and a mosque called the American Muslim Institute. The Tri-Faith Center connected the Abraham's Bridge, is what they called it, right? And the campus is fully operational, right? So there's proof on how religions set aside their differences in doctrine, realize their connected foundation, and utilize that as the conduit to which they came together to really get something done. Because the reality is, it don't matter whether you call God Allah, whether you call God God, or whether you say call God something in Yiddish because you're a Jewish speaking practice, right? We all oppressed by the same empire, and we all need each other to be able to get under the oppression, right? And from what I can tell, that's really what Jesus was talking about.
That's
right?
all he was talking about.
That was literally his concept. And I don't think a lot of people understand that because of the translation. But again, the reality is it was about having the oppressed people knowing that the kingdom of God is within us. We are the kingdom. We are the power. It is community building. It's relational. It is not transactional, right? And we got to get away from that transactional perspective and start building a community based on that. So I posed the question for Chester, what would it look like if we just had just 5 churches, right? It's 117 of them, or probably more than that, right?
Not all of them are operational.
It might
Hey,
be 100.
even the ones that ain't operational are still a part of this argument because that
Right.
is unoccupied land.
I agree, but so again, my position is it might be 100 churches occupied though, functional. It might be 300 buildings, if I'm being honest, right? Because what block can you go in Chester and walk more than 3 or 4 blocks either way without seeing a church building?
A church, true.
You know what I mean? It might be 300 buildings, but I think it's about 100 of them that's functional on Sundays.
Absolutely.
What if only 5 of them join the coalition and 2 or 3 mosques, right? If we had 8 solid institutions working together on some kind of council to move forward some kind of plan that will result in a direct output of a community building, whatever, right? How could that be? What could it look like?
This is something I've wanted to talk about and see for years because and for like the close circles that I talk about politics with, I always lean it back to the church or religious leaders and religious communities in general because it's a base. And more importantly, and I'm not trying to attack the community, right? But I think a large majority of the community has lost its way, right? And by that I mean literally just morality, right? Like, are you ethically aligned to embody I'm my brother's keeper, right? most of today's society does not have a morality check, and by saying that, I'm not saying I'm perfect, right? I think the Bible is very clear that everyone has sin, right?
Yeah.
But are you willing to acknowledge it?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think when you bring together communities that are rooted in acknowledging the sin and trying to live a better tomorrow, that is where the true growth comes. And so I'm 100% like, if we can get this thing off the ground with some religious leaders, have a council, and for all the naysayers out there that's like, oh, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, I can acknowledge, right? And this is a part of like responding to the bias or the naysayers, right? There's 2 terms that come to mind. right? How do we define politics, right? Or what governs politics? Well, most people will tell you money is the milk of politics, right? And so, how is politics administered? I would say it's the allocation of values and resources, right? And then we're talking about our community, and so you have to talk about Black politics. So, what is Black politics? It's the authoritative allocation of values and resources, meaning since day one in this society, we have not decided with any degree of like certainty what our outcome is going to be. It's been decided. Now we've fought back to change the narrative as best we could, but we have not actually overthrew with any degree of leverage, similar to like the Haitian brothers and sisters, even though we know that demise eventually came long term, right? But we have not actually had our own,
force, but go ahead, keep going.
right, but we haven't had our own silos to be like, or not silos, for our own communities at large really take over. Now, when I say this, I'm not discounting the success of Durham, North Carolina. I'm not discounting the success of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hell, I'm not discounting the success that we saw in Chester years ago. As you look at it from a large scale like framework, though, in this country, it's always been authoritatively allocated, right? And so coming back to these communities and trying to figure out a way to power together through what Claude Anderson coined powernomics, I think it is most successful with religious leaders.
Yeah, and history shows us that. So I want to amend a little bit. So you said politics is defined as the allocation or the authoritative allocation of resources. I want to add one word in there. It's the process of allocation, right?
100%.
The reality is that politics replaces war, and when politics breaks down, war ensues, right? Politics is the organized manner with which we allocate said resources to keep from going, right? And we, as Black people, often are politically ignorant, right? So that's where we are in a position where we have authoritative allocation as opposed to collective input to said allocation. Because the reality is that when people are doing it right, the politicians move on behalf of what they want. But when people don't understand, the politicians are giving carte blanche to be able to make whatever kind of decisions they want. And then that's when other interest groups are able to seep in, and then the power comes away from the people because they don't know. Somewhere in the Bible, they say, "My people perish due to lack of knowledge," and I'm saying that's somewhere right along the lines with that. And other than that, I agree, though, right? The pathway with which, especially Black people, have the most collective organization. You go to any Black community in USA, right, and probably all across the globe, and on the Sabbath, whatever day you acknowledge as the Sabbath, you're gonna find that religious institution is gonna have the most concentrated amount of people that's focused on one concept under one thing that unites them, and that's their belief in their higher power, right? Now, are there a whole bunch of factions that are not operating on one accord? Absolutely. But everybody is focused on the same concept. And that's why when you say that the religious piece is the most powerful way to go along with that, I agree. Now, if we add in the concept of pooling land, right? How many churches have and own land? How many churches have resources flowing through their fingertips every single week? What kind of volunteer networks can we utilize to enhance? Furthermore, what kind of advocacy power could we have? And I'm going to be honest with you, as it stands right now, the answer is none, because any church that is a 501c3 is limited in the amount of advocacy that they can actually give, because Empire craftily said that if you're going to take this tax exemption, you are not allowed to be political in the pulpit. Empirical control, but that's neither here nor there.
Wasn't that the faith-based initiative that Bush passed when he was doing that FBI?
We talking about old man Bush then.
I don't know which Bush it was. A Bush is a Bush.
Right. No,
Bush. Right.
You talking about Bush in the 80s. So I think, don't even quote me on the law, but that sounds about right. What I do know is that the way the churches were legally allowed to function during the time of King and X, they didn't have that problem that they have now, right?
Mhm.
So that this all comes to, simply put, the IRS tax code that says that if you're getting tax exemptions, you got to be neutral. The church was never neutral, ever. Jesus was not neutral. He was hands down a rebel, irrefutably. People want to argue, holla at me in the inbox. I'll give you the business. I'm very well versed in it, right? Jesus was a rebel. Jesus was anti-empire. He was pro-people, right? And he also was anti-established religion, but that's neither here nor there, and we could talk about that on another day as well. But the advocacy power can be rebuilt back up through our collective nature, right? If we all working together and we all on the same page advocating for what we advocating for, the church can be the way that we connect, but the advocacy can happen Monday through Saturday, and it ain't even, churches don't even got to lose their exemption. You understand what I'm saying? It's just really about organizing, right? We could address our go ahead. Absolutely.
No, I have a question, but go ahead. Just
I was
ask.
gonna say, we could address our housing issues. We could address these issues that we have with youth programs, and we could address these economic development issues that we have together. Go ahead for your question.
If these ways are possible and were once done or thought about being done, why has it taken so long to actually initiate? Like, what got in our way, right? What stopped us?
Tag me in.
Feel me?
Tag me in, coach.
It's a question anybody can answer.
Yeah, I got the answer for that. Tag me in, coach. You ready? The over reliance on fast money, right? I think as a community, we've adopted a culture of wanting everything quick, right? And no one's willing to put in the long game without receiving the benefits of said work, right? So like, if you get into a thing that most of us coming from Chester or any community Chester adjacent, right? We know of fast money through selling drugs, right? That's like a common thing, right? You put your money into it and you get your money out of it. All right, go ahead, P.
Selling drugs isn't fast money.
Right? That is fast money.
Selling drugs is tax-free money, right? It's not fast because it takes a while for you to make it. If I give you $50 and you make two, you got to keep flipping it till you really make some money. Now you can have some pocket change in your pocket, but to really have money takes a while, right?
So I'm gonna challenge you on that. It's fast money, and here's why I'm gonna challenge you on it. When people invest into said product, their goal is to flip it, right? Like immediately, I'm going to spend X money and I'm going to double X money at least. Correct?
Maybe if you have the right clientele.
Yeah, right. So if you don't have the right clientele,
that's why you're saying it. So like, look, not everybody that's selling drugs is getting money fast.
Nobody.
Right? The reality is that it's a low barrier to entry to get into the drug game. But
that's it.
It's
just tax free.
Last I checked, I don't think there's ever been a drug dealer in our communities, right, saying I'm doing this to get a 20% return over X amount of time, right? Like no one's thinking that way.
The numbers on what them weed dealers is doing, because sometimes they ain't even getting 10%.
But my point is, it's not the long game. They're going in it to pay their immediate bills and have immediate satisfaction. It's to keep the lights on, as opposed to a long game plan, right? When I invest in real estate, my plan is about building wealth over 10, 20, 30 years and generational futures. Weed and drug dealer and fast money is not thinking about the 20x and 20-year return, right? That is the definition of fast money. You've taken yourself out of the fight before the fight began.
Former drug dealers that are now real estate kingpins that did it.
There's some.
It's a lot.
But even
right, let's be honest. Most of white America got their money from organized crime, right? All of these major corporations that you see, all of these large families and all of that, right? They got their coins in organized crime, and through transgenerational growth, they were able to clean it up and send their children to college and all of that. But the difference is we got locked up and and
Houses
lost.
got ran up in, dads got missing, uncles are gone, nobody's here.
I think,
But that's
I think
I don't want to come off
Right,
like
right.
I'm pro crime,
Drug dealer.
right?
no.
I'm pro drug dealer. I'm
I,
pro drug
so
dealer.
I'm empathetic
Right.
to the drug game because I fully understand that nobody gets in the drug game because they like, oh, I got a million opportunities, but I want to blow it. Hove had a line. He said something to the nature of, you tell me that I can't do this, but then you deny me free enterprise, right? How you gonna tell me I can't sell drugs, but you're not gonna give me an opportunity to earn at the same time?
I think listen, I can go all day on this topic. Maybe me mentioning drugs was the big deterrent, right? But like, it's instant gratification. You get your product, you sell your product, you immediately get money back in your hand. When
It's
you invest,
In a kingpin, but I sold a little drugs and Nas, it's not instant, bro.
I didn't feel what you're feeling. And I told you
hear me
about
out.
it.
Hear me out.
Check this out,
Just
right?
hear me out.
I sold drugs in the city of Chester at a time where you could walk down 3rd Street and find $200 blowing on the ground, just laying on the ground. There was a lot of money in the city of Chester back in the day. Now there's damn near zero, right? People are getting jobs and going after trades because they realized that they were hustling for nothing. Nothing. People aren't just now deciding,
not getting fast money, bro. That's a misconception. That's all I'm saying.
It was tax-free, meaning you didn't have to pay anybody for the money you were getting, and you could spend it the way you wanted. But fast, it definitely wasn't that. It was weeks on end wearing the same clothes. Maybe take a shower, change your drawers. But if you wanted to stack some money, you had to not spend it. But if you were spending it like crazy,
right? Because I think you got to be out there. You got to be available. And if you're not out there and you're not available, you're not getting the money.
I think it's instant gratification, right?
Okay.
Like you're not working hard at anything. The hardest thing you do in that life is to not get shot.
And right? Not get shot, not get robbed, not get snitched on, not get set up by your girlfriend, not get locked up. Byproducts. There's a lot of things you got to not worry about.
Byproducts. They're all byproducts of you not wanting to get a job, or
you had a job and you could have got shot.
Let me finish. Right?
You could have went to jail.
And so again, I was playing the long game. Right. I joined the military. I did go and do those things. The military also provided me benefits that the weed game will never provide.
So could we agree that if you're not an academic scholar and you're not a sports fan, right? Like you're not a sports guy, right? Your way out of the hood is getting shot at, whether it's in them streets or in the military.
Right.
So let's bring it back home, right?
The
reality is that the plight is not as clear cut. We ain't got to get into that. But what we do know is that Chester right now is in an economic hardship due to generations of legislation that oppressed us, right? And whatever the pathway that individual chooses to cope with and get out of that oppression, I'm not interested in judging it, but I do know is we all collectively are falling under the same oppression. You are successful right now because you put your life on the line to get shot at.
Yes.
It is absolutely a much more noble decision than going in the streets. But the reality is that a street soldier and a U.S. soldier, both coming from the hood, both fighting the same battle. They getting shot at to try to make a better life for themselves, right? And the difference is you took a path that is widely accepted as more noble. But the reality is that you still had to put that ass in danger to get up out of this situation. So let's see. Let's not get into which pathway was right, but understand that we all under the same thumb of oppression, making these decisions that could cost us our life with the goal of trying to better ourselves.
I don't think I was trying to go down the rabbit hole of what the drug game is or what it entails. The reality of it is that like the successes that you got or that we both received from the military was a long-term play. You had to get in, you had to go to training, you had to go and mobilize and do all these things. And like after X amount of years, you got to see what it really meant, like how it paid off. In drug culture, you're going to invest your money, you're going to get your product, and then immediately that first time you give that product to someone, you're receiving a direct benefit. It's instant gratification. Whether you've made your money back or not, you gave someone a product and then you receive something. It's almost like
Nas, we got a check instantly on the 1st and the 15th. I graduated boot camp with thousands in the account. So
see, I didn't. I was in ROTC for 4 years. I was in ROTC for 4 years before boot camp, but I didn't receive any paycheck money.
Did they pay for you to go to college?
No, not initially.
They didn't pay for you to go to college?
Not initially, no.
You had to go through boot camp. You had to go through boot camp. All right, go ahead.
But y'all, listen, Nas, you were in ROTC. That was not the military. That was military training, right? You were
military training, so you're still training to get into it.
But all I'm saying is you chose college. You went to college, right? And then your college was your investment. When you got on active duty from day one on active duty, you got paid just like that hustler got paid on the streets, right? You can't say that because you went to college and you was not getting paid in college that was you in the military not getting paid. No, sir. Right? That was
3 years of not getting. Would you consider that instant? Would you
your time to go into the military as an officer? Right.
The question is, I acknowledge that. The question is, would you consider that instant gratification if I did ROTC for 3 years before getting that first paycheck?
I wouldn't consider college instant gratification, but that's not the argument that you made. You made the argument that the military was a long-term investment that didn't have instant gratification. Right. And my fact is that the military gives the same instant gratification on the 1st and the 15th that the hustler selling weed gets on the first day, even if he hasn't flipped it and became profitable.
How's that possible? If I acknowledge there are circumstances when people join the military where there is
for a job,
right? There is an aspect where there can be potential instant gratification. What I'm saying is, if you're evaluating the long-term play of being in the military, and you listen to it from my path, there was no instant gratification. There was 3 years of rolling around in dirt before I had a rank.
I mean, that's fair, but that's because you chose to go the officer route and you chose to go to college, and whether or not you went to the military or not, you had an investment in something that had nothing to do with the military. ROTC was a modifier to your degree plan that gave you a guaranteed job and a commission as an officer. But when you were in college, you were not in the military. Did Nasir make a long-term investment for his life? Absolutely. And I'm not negating that. I'm just simply saying that I didn't go to ROTC. I enlisted as an E1, right? So from the day I came on active duty, I was getting paid. From the day you came on active duty, you was getting paid, right?
Yeah, but you're looking at it. I guess we're talking
getting paid. So just like the hustler getting his lick for the $20 sale and is getting paid, and that you call instant gratification, we got that same type of instant gratification from our investment. That's all I'm saying. That's it. We got paid. You got paid, I got paid, and I made a long-term investment because I knew that the long-term benefits would put me in a better position. But I also know full well that selling drugs, bro, one, it's not a short-term investment. It takes a little bit of time because I wasn't good at it. I wasn't making no money. That's why I said, nah, this ain't my life. I'm not fucked up enough as an individual to do people wrong. I'm out here selling drugs, but I care. I give a fuck, right? So off the rip, I'm a fish out.
You losing. Right? You're giving it away.
Right?
Can I ask you a question? Because you're missing the point. What training? Hear me out. What training goes into you being a drug dealer?
Learning how to
do the drugs, learning how to protect yourself, learning how to read the streets. Bro, you got to be able to read.
You do that before you even put a piece of drug in. You think growing up in Chester, you weren't thinking about how to navigate the streets? I can distinctly remember not walking on certain blocks because I knew the block was hot.
That's correct. But would you agree that your upbringing uniquely prepared you to be a drug dealer? You just didn't choose that path?
You say it again?
Would you agree that your upbringing uniquely prepared you to be a drug dealer? You just didn't choose that path?
Sure, but I wasn't formally training to be a drug dealer, right?
The difference is word that gives it legitimacy is
No. Because when you talk about someone that goes to college, they are training for a path. When you talk about someone that goes into the military, especially through ROTC, they are training for a path. There is no training to be a drug dealer.
And you feel like everybody could go to college? Like college is accessible to everybody?
That's a twofold question. I think everyone has the ability in terms of like mental capacity to train. Hear me out. You gotta let me answer it. You gotta let me answer it.
I want you to answer the question that I asked.
I'm answering the question, but you gotta let me answer it.
All right.
I think everyone has the mental capacity to train their mind to be successful in college. Now, do I think everyone has the capital to go to college? No.
Nah, bro, you didn't answer. Do you think college is accessible to everybody?
Yes.
How?
What do you mean how?
Don't you got to qualify for a school?
Sure.
What if you don't have the mental aptitude?
Then you fucked up at somewhere in life.
That's a fact. You can't just be slow.
I think for the people that think they can't go to college, they didn't apply themselves in school.
All right, that's fair. I'll go with that. So cool. Now, what I can tell you from my real life experience, I never struggled with intellect, right? However, the reality is that around me, when I was growing up, my rational decision, my examples, my physical examples of success was drug dealers. So as unfortunate as it is, that pegged as an option in my mind before college because drug dealer was more tangible. And my family was drug dealers. And my community was drug dealers. And the movies was drug dealers, right? I had to be a dreamer to say, you know what? I want to go to college. Because the reality is that in my hood growing up, I didn't see a lot of examples of successfully college educated individuals that made a rational decision for me to say, yeah, it's worthwhile for me to put my time into this. Now, granted, my mom and my family and everybody was like, yo, you need to make good decisions, go to school, you know what I mean? Do this, do that. But the reality was that was the words that they told me. But my environment sold me something very different. Very different. And because I lacked guidance, I made a rational decision to go based on what I saw instead of what I was taught. Hence the reason why I started selling drugs. Now, fortunately for me, I realized this ain't my life. And then I tried to go back on track, but at this point, it was already too late. So I had to join the military as a last resort to try to get my shit back on track. Because young Drewski is like, you know what? I don't want to end up like my own, right? I don't want to be a waste of talent and intellect like my teachers was telling me that I was in high school. But the reality is that I was emotionally messed up. I felt like the system had failed me. And I felt like I didn't have no other options because what they was telling me that I needed to do, they wasn't really giving me no resources to do it. Everybody was, you need to do this, 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 and this, but wasn't nobody coming and grabbing me and showing me how.
We all have a story, and if you grew up from Chester, the story is very similar. I can paint that same picture for my story. Grew up in Chester. I can say I grew up in the Gardens. I can say I lived at 2617 Price Street. On the left side of my row home and on the right side of my row home, I had two teenage men that died, right? And I had to listen to the sad music over and over again for weeks. Right, I can make those same claims. I can also say that I graduated at the top of Chester High class, only to get to Howard and be at the bottom. Right, the first day of classes, I didn't even have classes because I couldn't afford it. Right, so all my money came from scholarships that I worked my ass off for in junior year and senior year of writing papers. On awards day, my name was said like 20 times. I got over $50,000 in scholarships. Right, that wasn't from track. I would go home from track practice and write. Right. Literally, that was my plan. Right. But so then I got the money.
Do that though, right? Like
but I'm saying that to say I knew more drug dealers than I knew politicians or lawyers. When you looked at my block that I grew up on, there was no doctors, there were no lawyers, there were no dentists, there was none of that. There wasn't even teachers. I might have had a firefighter. I might have had a cop. That's it. Right. And so the point that I'm making is that when I got my fucking face beating essentially the second week of classes at Howard, my first day of class, and realized I didn't understand shit that the professor was saying. That meant Nasir Young had to go back to his dorm room, buckle down, and learn. Period. And so I'm not giving anyone the excuse to say that it's too hard. You were in a circumstance in high school or middle school or whoever is watching when you felt like it was too hard, but you did not decide to buckle down. Period. Now, I'm not saying that that's fair. I never said it was fair. I can acknowledge in the game of spades, you don't get dealt.
Down when it was too late.
You don't always get to decide the hand you're dealt. We know this to be a fact. But what you're going to do is either walk away from the game or play the game. Pick up your fucking hand, use your 3 spades, and make it work. Period.
And you don't understand and see how that a person who chooses the drug game is doing that?
No.
That's fair.
No.
I get it. I don't agree with it.
I'm not saying that they are not trying to take an active role in creating their success, but also I'll acknowledge that most drug dealers I know take that same money and go fuck it up in the club that same week. Right. I can acknowledge that them same drug dealers would be dripped out and more J's than I got. Right. So because you're putting your money in the wrong place, you can't get mad at me. Yeah. Drake, you can't get mad at me. You feel me? If you want to be serious, we could talk about the old heads back from the 60s and 70s that was drug dealers and was taking their money and flipping it back into real estate. Why you ain't do that?
I mean, but
because we lost that. We lost the old heads. There was no tutelage to tell us.
Ain't got nothing to do with
anything. You were just talking about going home from track and writing. Who taught you that? Who told you to do that?
Right.
Nobody told me to do it. I decided.
So what made you think you would gain from that?
In your head, something just told you if I write,
go home and write.
You want to know what's funny? I'm gonna tell you this. There was 2 people. I'm not discounting my parents. I'm not discounting my relatives, any of them, because they all played a role in me wanting better. But if we're talking about me writing and wanting to give back, right? Mm-hmm. I would say I would attribute that to 2 of my teachers. Mm-hmm. One was Miss Pollock. Okay. And the other one was Ray Thompson, who's still at Chester High as a vice principal.
Right.
That's who I would attribute it to. They both pulled me aside, right, and was like, "You need to do more." They started giving me more work.
Right. Bingo. Right. And there are people that say to drug dealers, "You need to sell more, or you need to be out here more, or you need to carry this gun, or you need to shoot at this person. Or here, let me buy you these Jordans, let me buy you this chain, let me buy you this hoagie."
Nah, so either one of your parents got
get you to go crazy.
No.
Nobody in your family got degrees?
The first person to get a degree in my family was my older sister.
Okay. So now, did that influence your decision to go to college, any?
I mean, I think watching her leave for college and then ultimately going to see her on campus, definitely it made it something that's obtainable. But then I would just flip the conversation back and say she didn't have anything in terms of like having someone in her direct, path that went to college. So then it's like the argument still exists that she decided to figure out a way to make it out. I mean, my guidance counselor, when I applied to Howard, my guidance counselor literally in so many words told me there's no way in hell I'm going to get into Howard.
Who was your guidance counselor?
Miss Spears. Listen, Miss Spears told me, she said,
any communications at Chester High with my guidance counselor.
I love my guidance counselor.
But look, this is another thing that's a fact. Guidance counselors picked and choose who they gave information to.
They definitely did that.
Right? It's irrefutable. I went to Chester High for 4 years. Right? I didn't get any guidance from my guidance counselor. 0. Bro.
But I mean, but even with that, right? Like there was like 300 people that graduated from the high the year I graduated. I would say maybe 40 of us was going to even see the guidance counselor. Bingo. And like most of the people that were going, I'm still in communication with. Like I can talk about, the Gervais, the Jasmines, the Crystals, right? Like the Chanels, right? Like we were all actively pursuing trying to go to college. So then it's like I don't necessarily think I can say that the community either hindered my ability to go to college or not. I just know that it was something that we all thought about and we all pursued it.
Right. So to bring it back to the discussion we having,
Instant gratification.
So we could utilize this caveat to tie it in really well, right?
Yeah.
This is why we need an interfaith connection, so that way we could fill these gaps.
Right.
Because you say everything you say, and you're right. But the reality is that everything I said is right too, because I'm speaking on a real life experience that I had.
Two things can be true.
Two things could be true, right?
Mm.
And what I can tell is that our decisions are our own, but our environment absolutely influenced our decisions.
Absolutely.
If we can work to build an environment that is pro-college and pro-building, right, then we could inevitably reduce the amount of people who see the allure of the streets. And one day I'm going to write a book that really puts people to understand, like, it's no mistake that drug dealing is not the right decision. But I just want to argue that when your environment tells you that it's successful, it's not an irrational one. And that's where I really want to draw the line on where environment makes a major difference, man, a major difference. It plays a much larger role than humans want to acknowledge. And I think the reason why humans struggle to acknowledge it is because if I give any credit to my environment, then it's going to inevitably take credit away from me, right? And we like to say, oh, I did this.
I did this
because of me, right? And that doesn't track with social science. Social science shows time after time after time that every successful person was successful because somebody poured into them. Nobody does this shit by themselves. Nobody. Jesus had 12 disciples. Holla at me. Now, so with that being said, I think that this is why it's very important for us to really bridge this gap, man, because the system is broken, right? And we have very many talented individuals who make bad decisions because the environment sways it, right? Whether that is because of lack of knowledge that the Bible says that our people perish, or whether it's because of lack of community that is keeping us working in individual silos, right? And that's not to say that if you got the top 10%, that cream is going to rise every time, no matter what your situation is. And that's a fact. Because the reality is that I did everything wrong in high school. And as far as capitalism is concerned, I'm still doing pretty damn good. Right? I did not graduate at the top of my class, although I should have. Right? I graduated with a 1.6 GPA because I was worried about all of the wrong stuff.
All of the wrong stuff.
Right? And I was nursing my mommy issues and my daddy issues and my lack of structure. I used to tell the teachers, like, they'd be like, oh, well, such and such, we're going to call home. And I don't give a fuck, I'm going to answer. But what does that say about the situation? It says that I lack guidance, bro. Because I was confident in knowing that when my teacher did call, I really was going to answer. I was picking up that phone. Young Drewski was a latchkey kid from a very young age. Shout out to my mom. I love her, man. She did the best she had. And I think she taught me morals. She gave me the structure that a single mom could do. But at the end of the day, when I went through puberty, my mother couldn't handle me.
Couldn't handle you.
And when I started earning, regardless of the way that in which I started earning, and I started giving my mom coins, that changed the dynamic, right? Because now I'm really grown. But I'm 16. I still got 9 more years of frontal lobe development left. I'm stupid for every intent and purpose, but you couldn't tell me that, right? I had too much control. My environment gave me power that I didn't earn. And I had unearned power and I lacked wisdom. So I'm out here making grown man decisions with little boy instincts, right? And now here I am left to live with the decisions even today, right? I'm not making excuses. I take full accountability for what I did because back then I knew what I was doing, even if I didn't understand the impact of it. I made all my decisions. I'm the one that chose to leave and go do what I was doing, going to my girl's house, going to work, going to grab an ounce so I could flip that. And this is why I know it is not fast money. Because I was out there with hours to go home with $40.
Freezing cold, NJ in my hand.
Right. It wasn't fast. It might have been easy, right? But
It wasn't even easy.
Right, that's why I said even that. I can't really say it was easy because you still had to hustle and grind. And without that hustle and grind, I was coming back home with the same amount of weed that I left with. So it wasn't easy, but it was definitely low-hanging fruit. I agree with you there.
Definitely low hanging. Definitely.
It was the path that it wasn't the path of least resistance, right?
I mean, I think this is a part of this conversation, right? Like we're talking about instant gratification. We're talking about the ease of doing something or being a part of said community or doing something, right? Like really making tangible change. When you look at our local politics, it's widely a popularity contest.
Yes.
Right. And then when you look at the ability to be a part of a religious community, it is harder to be a part of it because there's accountability, there's disciplines, there's training, there's reading, right? Like you don't just become a part of, or not even a part of, believe in a religion without putting in the work. Right. And so there is no instant gratification because before you can hear the sound of God, you have to go through something. You have to read. You have to like have a community to help you have discernment, right? Like, and this is the argument I'm making. We have to move away from going into things that is easy and or has some degree of instant gratification. Now, the reason I keep tying in religion is because in order for you to really discern the voice of God, you got to put in this work. I need you shooting in the gym. I need you to have morality. I need you to have ethical decisions. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. Because like when you say things like this, Herbert, like, well, you messed up at some point in your life. I can acknowledge that. All I'm saying is I acknowledge I messed up. And tomorrow I am going to work at being better.
Yes.
Tomorrow I am going to take it to God. Tomorrow I am going to talk to someone in my community and be like, hey, man, listen, maybe I'm not as disciplined as I thought. Maybe I need an accountability partner. Rondé said it last call. Rondé literally ended the call saying, hold me accountable.
Yep.
You know what I mean? One of the most successful brothers to come out of the city said, I can still be held accountable.
Absolutely.
Period.
And
I saw drugs as a revolution. Selling drugs was a revolution. It was an easy way to get money. We can buy what we need to buy, and we can go up against the system. I was always about breaking the system, right? Always about breaking it down, right? Disruption is the key, and that's where I'm at, right? But now I understand love is the key, right? Break the brothers down to get them to understand that going to school, going to trade school, coming back, buying property, fixing it up because you have the know power. You can do it if you have the willpower. So I agree with you 100%, right? Drug, instant gratification, but everything is instant gratification. Chasing your dreams is instant gratification. Yeah, it takes a while, but once you get to that point, it was like it was overnight, right? People look at things and people do things all the time. They're like, damn, man, he did it. He's so successful, but he had to work. He had to grind.
But it's not instant.
But what I'm saying, it looks like it's instant to someone else that didn't go through it. You understand what I'm saying? You said drugs was, I'm telling you, I sold drugs for damn near 20 years. How many years did you sell it for? 2? You said instant gratification. No, it wasn't. It never was. Right. It didn't work that way. I had people I had to feed. I wasn't selling drugs for the chains and the whips and the money. I was selling drugs to feed and make sure my house continued to run. Right? I had jobs. I worked. I didn't have a problem with working. You feel me? But on the other side, it was some money that I could make that wasn't taxable. And that's all it was for me. Just not being taxed.
That goes back to the former conversation we had, I think, on the second call, where we talked about what is some of the things that the Black community face. You have access to capital, which is your ability to achieve the capital, and then excess capital. Once you've achieved the capital and you've paid your expenses, how much do you have left over? The Black community is not netting anything. And this is when I talk about the long-term play, right? Like giving up your $5 today, right? And not expecting to see that $5 again for another 5 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if you take that money, and this is the hard part that people don't like to think about. If you take that money, and let's supposedly say we bought a house, right? And that house gave us a net profit of $400, right? Every month we made $400, right? But it took 10,000 of us to get the property, and we all put in $5. Well, if every month we took some of that 400 and paid it back to the people, then only out of the 400, right, $400 that came in, you're only getting $5. How many times is it going to take every month to get pay out everybody that donated? It's going to take a very long time, unless you take the money, you put it into the next property. You take the money and you put it in the next property. You take the money, you put it in the next property.
Right.
And then eventually, over time, you will have a return, ROI. You know, I like plugging that in.
Yeah.
Where you will get paid.
That's a fact.
You will get your revenues. You will get it. But again, it's patience. And so when we talk about the drug game, that was how I got here. They're putting their money in and instantly getting the gratification to say I made something. It's not about did they make a net profit. It's they got something back out of the minuscule work that was put in. When you do other investments, you don't see that return. Not initially. You don't really see it until you've doubled it, flipped it like multiple times, and then you get your return back.
Yeah. So what kind of things stand in the way of us doing this, right? So one, we got this historical distrust, right? And for
You think
whatever,
that's the biggest thing?
I mean, I think I'm about to name a few things, right?
Ego to me.
The biggest thing is probably ego and territory.
Put the ego down. I don't care what you've achieved personally, right? What you've achieved can come in and assist us. But there's no need for you to come in there with your head all big, talking about, yeah, I did this, I got this, put the ego down. Come in and build with your brothers, bro. Like, at some point, we got to understand we got to start on the floor. That's the problem. We don't want to start on the floor. We want to start. We want to start above people. And when you start above people, you create enemies. So we start on the floor and we get the. But go ahead, Nas.
I personally don't think it's ego. I think that might have a very minuscule factor, but like what we got to realize, like let's be real here. If our white brethren or our Chinese brethren with any degree of capital decided they wanted to invest in something, it takes a smaller population of them to achieve the same amount of leverage that Black communities do because of excess capital, right? So before I was talking about how 10,000 people need to put up $5 to make 50,000. Well, in those other communities, it could be each person putting up 5,000. It is a lot easier for people with excess capital to create marginal success, right?
So where does that excess capital come from?
I agree, but it ain't no point in concerning that because we already acknowledge that Black people as a people don't have excess capital. I'd also go as far as the endeavor to say that is a systemic outcome. We control 1.5% of the capital the day after slavery, and in 2026, we still control 1.5% of the capital. People 100%. Always be like, oh, yeah, it's way more millionaires today than it was yesterday. It is, but that's because the pot got larger, not because we control a larger percentage of it. The amount of the capital in the world functioning around that we control has not grown since slavery. And I got that from Dr. Claude R. Anderson in Powernomics, to quote your book.
And I don't necessarily... I'd agree to a bit, but I wouldn't.
Man, you ain't got to agree or disagree. This is numbers that's based on facts.
He said degree, so he agree and disagree at the same time.
Yeah, it's fair. I'm just talking about, I'm quoting actual numbers. We still control the same amount of the pot. Yes, the dollar value has gotten bigger, but the percentage of it is the same.
Who do you blame?
Not advanced.
Who do you blame?
The system.
What else?
What system? What system you talking about? Ain't no system.
I'm asking.
You said it ain't no system. It ain't no
system. Trying to hurt us. That's poppycock.
What else do you blame?
Racism.
What else do I blame? So I'm not gonna go beyond anything other than the system because the system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
What it's supposed to do.
Now, what I will acknowledge is I see where you're going with it, and I see that you're trying to say that we got to take an individual accountability as well. And I don't disagree with you. I'm just simply saying that money flows as part of a system. And it don't matter how much individual accountability that we can take. As soon as the number of amount of money that we control starts getting above 1.5%, they start cutting federal contracts that create wealth. They start cutting the Center for Minority and Veteran Services, right? That they just recently cut. They start changing the rules of the game to ensure that the percentages remain the same. And that ain't got shit to do with individual accountability. That has everything to do with those who control and make the laws can manipulate the laws in their favor to produce the outcomes. I'm going to stand 10 toes down that we have a systemic problem, not just an individual accountability problem. Furthermore, I say the reason why we lack individual accountability is because the system was designed that way as well. They implemented hierarchy systems within our community. They implemented broken trust systems within our community, all with the intent to perpetuate this control that they continue to have on us. And while we sit here and try to place blame on each other, we getting spun around with the loop-de-loop. And I really
I don't deny any of that. But since we're speaking in absolutes, right? There's nothing to say that the elites in the Black community of this world that we were talking about that still seemingly are a representative of this community, right? Being Black and being disenfranchised, but they still control a degree of wealth, right? They're still a part of this argument. And what we can say for certain is that in large numbers, their money has not been pulled back into the Black community. And so I would still challenge you to say, whose fault is it? Right? Because equally, they're part of this community because they have melanated skin. Now you can also say, oh, well, all skin folk ain't your kinfolk. Sure, you can make that argument all day, right? But the reality of their ancestors came from the same place our ancestors did. And if we want to be fair and honest, there is nothing to say that they couldn't start another organization and seeing that organization thrive. You can also make the argument, oh, well, look what happened to Marcus Garvey. Look what happened to X at boom, boom, and boom. Look what happened to Tulsa. Every time we create something, they destroy it. What I could also say is me and Andrew talked about being in the military. Did we not? Okay. After we joined the military, what we can say is that we were willing to put our life on the line for $1, right? Whatever that dollar amount was. We can also say that ex-elites in the Black community didn't decide to create their own militia or military and start going around slaughtering half of America. That didn't happen, right? And I'm not saying that's a good thing. What I'm saying is that could have been something that happened, right? They could have took billions of dollars and be like, we're going to start our own army, right? No different in that term.
Well, you don't think that they tried?
Just hear me out. Just hear me out, right? No different than that term. And you could have got a bunch of people from the hood. It was like, you know what? He giving up $100,000 checks. All I gotta do is tote this gun. They toting guns for $10,000. They toting
guns for $1. Niggas toting guns to eat a hoagie.
So my point is, I'm not saying that the system was not designed. I'm not saying that the system is not currently redesigned and reinvented to further marginalize the community. My fucking major in college was African American studies. Trust me, I know how the system was done. I can talk about redlining all day. I can talk about blockbusting all day. We can go down that rabbit hole. We can talk about the mass migration of white people that created suburbia and how suburbia disenfranchised the community of Chester because Chester was the original city. We can talk about all that stuff. All I'm saying is there has to be some accountability to say you fucked yourself up too. That's it.
I mean, I don't agree with you, but all right, I'll respect it. Because the reality, so we gonna blame the victims of the crack epidemic for fucking themselves up.
Absolutely.
Ooh, I don't agree with it, but whatever. We gonna bring.
So we can talk about how the crack got filtered into the community, but then we don't want to talk about conveniently forget that there was Black people pelleting the crack within our own community.
There were hungry people selling crack to make money to feed
that the crack was getting put in the community. They were cutting jobs as a result of the same white flight that you just spoke on that disenfranchised the Black communities. They closed up the businesses and cut the jobs and left, and then put this crack on the doorstep, knowing that niggas needed to feed their family.
So if Budweiser came to the city and dropped off 100,000 fucking cases of beer, you gonna feed that shit to your daughter? You gonna feed it to your son?
No,
I'm not.
I'm gonna go on the block and I'm gonna sell it to any grown ass individual that wants to buy it.
I'm not feeding my kids crack.
You're peddling it.
I can sell it to someone else. I'm not.
All I'm saying is that it was a rational decision, bro. Listen, you know, like I know, if my kid's hungry, steal the dishes out your kitchen. Morality is going out of the window when your stomach is rumbling,
bro.
I think while that is true, I think the issue goes back to what in your lens do you see as community, right? And so we can make the argument all day. Well, I sold it because there were other grown people making a decision. But if you just hear me out, just hear me out, just hear me out. If you can identify that the things that were being done while you wanted to put something on the tables for your family and do things for your household, you also have to acknowledge and contend with the fact that there was a larger community that you were peddling bullshit to.
All right, that's fair.
Right. And so this goes back to the original argument of the religious leaders, where it's like, okay, you have a disagreement, you have a faction, right, where, that you feel personally a part of, that you want to lead, right, but you're willing to subjugate another faction because you don't personally agree with it, or you don't feel that yearn to want to be a part or help that other person. It's always based on community. The problem is Black folk in general, when we talk about our community, have not taken the time to understand what it means to be a part of the larger community in context.
Who's the larger community?
Chester, the McCaff in the garden shouldn't be beefing. The projects in the farm shouldn't be beefing. It's all Chester.
Right. And you feel like that happens because of decisions we made, not because of structural impediments.
I think two things can be true, like Tom Outland said.
All right, that's
we've been saying it all day. Two things can be
that's
true
all I'm saying, right?
at the same time.
I'm struggling to place the blame squarely on the individual who are responding in the system that they was put in, right? You know what behavioral economics is? Are you familiar with that?
Come on, of course.
Yeah. So the reality is that this system has been studied. Human nature has been studied. There was a Kerr report that fully knew in the 1960s that when you aggregate low income, the absolute response is increases in crime, right?
100%.
You know why they call a project? Because it's a project, an experiment. They took the Bowling Green projects in Chicago, tested the Kerr experiment, realized it was wildly successful, and built housing projects all across America. And then they surrounded suburbs, and then they put the jobs of the white people into those police departments because they knew crime would go up. Put the white people into the fire departments because they knew crime would go up. They put the white people in the schools because they knew that they can go and educate the students, right? And they built communities off of our tax dollars and to our demise, while fully understanding that behavioral economics would say that under these conditions, we will respond in this specific way. And they built a goddamn system knowing the outcomes.
I think that's a lens, that's a version to kind of look at it, right? But like I would also argue that the original housing project was not created to subjugate a community. It was created to provide housing for industrial labor.
But all I'm saying,
it was industrial labor, right? Industrial labor. Hear me out.
When you talk about risk management, right? Because this is you saying that you don't believe it was created for that, but I don't think you're acknowledging the real life behavioral economics. In risk management, do you collectively aggregate risk, or when you dealing with risk management, do you spread out the risk and make it into a diverse nature? Which one would you do?
You spread it out, risk compounds.
Right. So why would you aggregate low income, right? Instead of diversifying it and saying, okay, because we know behavioral economics says that you're going to move up to the average of the people that you're around, why wouldn't you take each one of these low income people and put them throughout the community on like maybe one low income person per block so that low income person can rise to the level of the block? Why would you collectively put them all in one spot if the goal was not intentionally to make sure that they decline perpetually? Why wouldn't you manage this risk the same way you manage all of the other risks? Your statement is you don't believe that that's why they created it. My statement is that's a naive statement.
I think what you're describing is a byproduct. I think their intent was to have workers for industrial labor, and the industrial economy that we had was largely centered around city centers, right? So we talk about the Chesters, right? We talk about the Phillies, we talk about the Detroits, and Detroit being one of the largest ones. Detroit infrastructure was on industrial processes, right? Ford, car manufacturing was a byproduct. I mean, the housing projects was a byproduct of needing labor, and more importantly, cheap labor. Cheap labor can't afford big ass houses, so cheap labor needs projects, right? We need to build buildings and build them up, and then put people in them. Now, what came of that, right, is an infrastructure that was heavily based on industrialization, right? So now the problem becomes what happens to that community when the industrialized processes and systems and organizations that were there leave, right? And so now we're talking about the byproduct that you're talking about, which is white flight, the advent of suburbia, right? Because now the money that was in those cities have left, and you've effectively subjugated the community because those laborers now have nowhere to labor. I think two things could be true, but you're looking at it from an aspect, and I'm telling you, what likely happened is they weren't even thinking about that when it was created. They were thinking about capitalism. How can I get these motherfuckers working and put them in a position where they don't feel the bite of not making the money that they probably should be making?
Where were they working at? Where were they, who were these people? First of all, I want to know, who were these people that you're talking about right now? They were black people?
It was all races. It was all races. And honestly, if I'm correct, the first project was in New York, and most of those citizens, most of the inhabitants of that first project were white.
Now listen. Most of those inhabitants, Ruth L. Bennett, she's a white lady, bro. Right? That was a barracks building that for service members. The Gardens, that was Sunship. You feel me? The McCaff was damn near all white. You know what I'm saying? Like, so back in the day, yes. My grandmother lived in the LV. Most people that grew up when my grandma grew up, they wanted to move out. They wanted to buy a house. They didn't want to stay there for years. But it didn't matriculate and grow downhill. It didn't go to the next generation of people that went in there. Then when drugs hit, it just blew everything up, right? So I don't know, man. I love talking to y'all, man.
The Gardens is not what I'm calling the projects. When I'm talking about the projects, I'm talking about high rises that was specifically intended for low income, right?
Right.
You are correct that the working class neighborhoods was built based on industrial, and the working class homes were built based on industry, but that is not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically referring to projects that was built specifically for low income with HUD dollars that was built after white flight in the 70s, right?
Right. Those are two. Right. We just have to acknowledge the timeline. Those are two separate arguments. I think the proliferation of that process became a thing after white flight. And now you can make the argument that they started to build more of these low income houses, right, for black communities. And you can say, well, all it did was further marginalize and marginalize the community. But the intent behind building the first housing project was purely a capitalistic mindset. We have a demand for workers and we need to be able to provide for them. No different than I don't even know what I can say to that, but it was purely off of
the color law.
I have read that. I have read that.
I don't even understand how you're making a statement right now after making that book.
Because the color law,
it was not capitalistic intended. Because if if the intent was capitalism, then why did they simultaneously deny development for any kind of black housing development? Why did they put it in the covenants and restrictions that they would not even damn fund the insurance if they knew that it was going to be for black people? I'm struggling to acknowledge that it just sounds like you going off of the general stories that they tell and not the reality of what actually played out. There was too many intentional legislations on the federal level, right, that had to do with suppression of individual black housing for me to believe that this was strictly driven by capitalism and that it's a byproduct that we were marginalized. I don't buy that shit at all. As a matter of fact, I detest it.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm gonna ask you one question and then I'm gonna explain.
All right.
When you think about large project buildings and infrastructure, name an era. Give me a 10-year span.
70 to 80.
Okay. And that's the point I'm trying to make. The first large-scale housing project was established in the 30s.
So right? You're talking about individual housing.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about high-rise buildings. The first time that you've seen that in American existence was in Atlanta and it was in New York.
And it was specifically for low income?
It was specifically for low income, and it didn't have a race. It was, we need laborers for cheap and they can't afford the houses. So we need to make an infrastructure that accommodates them so they can work in my factories for cheap.
So they called that transient housing in my reading, and it was not individualized to high rises. The part where they started making the specific individualized high rises was post World War II, not in the 30s. So the argument that I'm making is not in line with the argument that you're making. I think this is another thing where two things can exist in the same space at the same time. I'm saying post 1960, I think it was called the Kerr Report, where they realized that the aggregation of low income will result in high crime. Every single piece of housing that they made for low income after that report was no longer a byproduct, but it was intention. Because when you know better, you do better. Now, granted, there was never an even playing field, billions of dollars and millions of acres of land where I agree with that. That not only did they give them land, but they gave them land grants to work the land, and they hired people to come and teach them how to do it while simultaneously denying all of us for that. So I agree with Tom Outland. This shit is systemic, and it goes all the way back. And if you want to even go back to that point, so where I can make a stronger point in the 30s before they was actually doing the housing projects, right? They were denying black people the use of VA loans, even though they qualify for it as veterans during that same timeline that you're talking about. All of this stuff was structural and intentional to lock us out of economic development. I don't buy it. It's just a byproduct. It was intentional.
I don't disagree with that. Like, you got to understand, the Constitution was drafted by seemingly 14% of what became America, right? Like, the people that signed the Constitution, nobody was a woman,
right?
Nobody was black,
right?
And you had to own property. And when I say property, I mean land and slaves.
Yeah.
Right, those are the only people that signed the Constitution. I acknowledge that this country is founded on deeply ingrained injustice. So I'm not denying
that it was about capitalism, which is very harmful, and it actually masks the true intent.
No, it's the first. This is what I'm trying to the distinction you have to understand. The first housing project was not designed to house black people. It was designed to house low-income white people and laborers in general, right? I'm not saying what you're saying is not true. I'm saying we just have to be realistic to the timeline, right? Because after the 30s, black people became widely successful, right? What we saw in the 50s is black people had a wealth accumulation faster than any other race in America, right? And then what did black people do? We rightfully started lobbying more for our rights. Right. And what became of that? What became of that was more pushback from the system. And so you've seen the KKK, you've seen an increase in lynching, you've seen all these things, you've seen Jim Crow, right? I'm not denying any of that.
And then you saw the predatory civil rights bill, right? That gave us social equality without economic equality.
I agree. And what we saw in the midst of that was white flight, where they were like, all right, well, you're lobbying for this politically. I'm going to leave the community, and now you're fucked. I'm not disagreeing with that. The only thing I was disagreeing with,
redline you in and intentionally force down your value of your house by making the realtors come in and assess it differently to ensure that you can never see ROI.
I agree.
Know that this is the economic engine with which you will build the wealth that will finance the campaigns that can get us out of control. Right?
I agree with all those things. I agree with all those things. The problem is, you said that the housing projects were established for black people, and I'm pushing back to say that it was not.
So let me change that. Established, right, to post 1970, it was weaponized. How about that? Can we agree on that?
Now I agree with you. 100%. It was weaponized in the 60s, 70s. 100% agreed.
But I feel like we wasted time, right, debating a simple, small semantics that doesn't matter and didn't change the outcome. And really all it did was detract away from the reality that the system was designed. And that's why I'm not willing to place blame squarely on individualism and say we got to take accountability. when in fact, the system, every time we begin to rise, adjusts and adapts to ensure that we stay in our fucking place. Every time, bro. Every time. And it's with intention. At this point now, I can no longer believe that it's just because we out here making bad decisions, because that wasn't the case.
I think as a whole, everyone in America makes bad decisions. I don't think it's exclusive to black people, because arguably, if I'm being honest, right, if my skin was white and I had the head start that white America had, there's no fucking way you're catching me, right? And like when you look at the white household of today, the average white income or average household for white America is like 800,000, right? 600,000, somewhere along those lines. If I had that head start from multiple generations, my shit would at least be 30 million, right? So like, I would also argue that white America failed as well, right? Like, it is what it is. Americans make bad decisions. Americans have poor financial literacy.
Right. But that was simply because they would rather make sure that nobody got educated, lest they actually give a quality education to black people. So all this is now is what the brothers say, the chickens coming home to roost. That's what we seeing, right? So I do agree with you 100%. Now in 2026, most Americans got it backwards and don't know, right? I do agree with that. I also fully understand that racism is a byproduct to perpetuate capitalism. I understand that.
Now we talking. Now we cooking. I agree with that.
In no way, shape, or form am I ignorant to it, but all I wanted to do was to make sure that I defend the ideology that says that we got to blame the victims of the system for responding the way that the behavioral economics put us in. I'm not willing to do that. I used to, right? I used to have that for sure, right? I was one of the biggest speakers of it, because I'd be like, well, shit, I made it out. I just did this, and that. Until one day I was sitting on the toilet, education by defecation, and the Most High whispered in my ear and was like, hey, do you really believe in any way, shape, or form that your plight is different? You know why you got the heads up that you got? Because you had to get shot at to get it. And when that put it in perspective, and when I realized that every single bit of my success hinges upon my decision to sign on that line to become a mercenary for the capitalistic country, right? And I found my ass in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting a war against people who look just like me, like literally like this, right? For capitalistic interests. And when that connection was made in my mind, that's where I decided, oh damn, our decisions ain't our own, right? It ain't what we think it is, and my plight ain't that different than the person that goes out into the streets and got shot at.
We ain't got too much time left, but then I just want to ask you a quick question. With that rhetoric, the argument can also be made that low-income white people, in some capacity, face the same issue, right?
I agree with that 100%.
Now, here's the other thing I'll say too. The problem is, as a black person, when I put on the uniform, there is a part of me that is acknowledging that I am trying to progress my future, but inevitably there's a part of me that has to contend with and accept that I am wearing the uniform of an organization that technically conspired against my people. Right? So this is a real conversation, because my last 2 years in the military,
I processed some therapy as a result of it.
My last 2 years in the military, this was a real internal struggle that if we're being honest, required therapy, right? Because I'm a historian through and through, right? So I can acknowledge that the first voice for the African American community, by and large, was also the military. And people always question it when I say it. They're like, what you mean it was the military? And I always say, when the Revolutionary War popped off, black bodies were used as leverage against Great Britain. And then you've seen it again in the Civil War, right? And whether it was black people advocating for themselves, it was capital, right? Human capital that was used with a black face And from that point on, they had to contend with the fact that these people have something more to give than being slaves.
Absolutely.
Right. And then we got to see HBCUs pop up at scale. And HBCUs, for those that don't know, most of them were training barracks for Black people to become successful and indoctrinate and to become officers. I went to arguably one of the best ones.
Well, I mean, for sure, the top one.
Like literally, Howard's ROTC program used to pump out Black officers in the hundreds. You know what I mean? Like the hundreds. My graduating class was the largest one in 40 years, and it was 13 of us.
Right.
13.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? And so, like, I think it's a larger argument, a larger conversation, honestly, and that we can have at some point. But I'm saying all that to say that, like, pick your struggle. Like, and I think the white community has accepted picking that struggle, and arguably easier than Black people. And I can acknowledge the history that comes with wearing a uniform for a Black person.
We can't make that statement. We got to say some of them.
Just some of them. Yeah, some of them, 100%. Because I know several white counterparts in the military who have generations. Like, and when I say generations, I'm meaning like 4, 5 generations back of like pictures and letters and all these things of my granddaddy served, my great granddaddy served, my great great granddaddy served, and they take pride in it. I can acknowledge the hardships of a Black person trying to take pride in a military force that marginalized its people. But I mean, we can also say when we talk about the integration of schools, the National Guard came to make sure Black people wasn't getting fucking slaughtered every day, right? Like there are pros and cons, but you got to be able to like healthily talk about it.
Right. I agree.
Lincoln University, hey Tom, you got to stop. Cause listen, I love my Lincoln brothers and sisters, but they ain't messing with Howard, big dog. Just stop. Now you know what else is which is sad, and I'll land on this in terms of HBCUs. Cheney University used to be the most prolific Black institution to exist, and it pumped out hundreds of Black intellectuals. And now look at it.
What happened to it?
The lack of community.
So we understand that community plays a big part in anything, right?
Absolutely.
The lack of community for Chester, the lack of trust, the lack of empathy, the lack of coming back with knowledge to resources and giving it to the younger generation, the lack of just sitting and talking to the younger generation, just to give them energy and insight on things that might not go the way they want it to go, right? And that's what we were talking about.
Right. And that's
we're not doing that anymore. Right now we're judging people and saying, shit, I got mine. Why the fuck couldn't you get yours?
Right.
That's not what we're doing.
I didn't say I said that's what's happening. Not this podcast.
Yeah, not us.
Here. Not here. But you look outside and you say, if there's a bunch of Black millionaires, why they don't come back to the community and give? Number one, they were probably told not to. It's in your best interest if you want to continue making money to not go back. Because if you go back, you're gonna help somebody, and they're gonna ruin you, or they're gonna ruin you just by going back. So they scare them, and they're not coming back and giving us anything, or not coming back to help. So,
or let's take Kanye for example, right? As soon as you start speaking off script, they remind you who really in charge.
Nigga, not you. Look at Diddy. Look.
Right.
You think they didn't know he was doing all that stuff?
Listen,
for years?
Diddy is a predator. Right. However, Diddy been a predator, and Diddy's predatory nature didn't become a problem until he started saying, "We no longer gonna sit and take this down. We ain't gonna take it sitting down. We gonna organize. We gonna get politically active." And then boom! Now all of a sudden, now Diddy is public enemy number one.
I think he lost when the Black Godfather passed away. Right, Sussex record, bro. When he was gone, right, he was protecting a lot of brothers, bro. Like, so but I'm excited for this podcast. I appreciate y'all, man. And listen, right now we need the clergy, so we can reach out to
we need to make a call to action to some clergy, man.
Right.
We need brothers from the mosque. We need some brothers from the church.
Right.
Reach out to us. Let's sit down and have a conversation on how we could drive this collective council forward.
So I'm gonna say this real quick. Tom Outland, that's my brother. I appreciate him. I think that's somebody we should have on here. You feel me?
I agree. I watched one of his briefs.
Right.
Brilliant.
Like he's brilliant. I love the way he thinks. I think we need to all think, if not like him, sort of like him, right, to get our community to come together. But I would love for him to be a guest on the podcast. I'll reach out to you a little bit later, probably tomorrow because it's late now. But my fault. You don't never go to sleep, so you always trying to do podcasts 11 o'clock at night and stuff like that. But anyway, I appreciate y'all, man. I do.
Hey.
And
it's been a great conversation. I apologize for cutting you off, man. I'm sorry, bro.
Listen, I'm all about having healthy debate. I'm all about having healthy debate. Tom, I respect all the comments. You know what I mean? Like forcing and fostering deeper discussion because I played off of a couple of the comments you made, right? I think this dialogue we just had is also another way to challenge this idea of having the religious leaders come together as a council, right? There's going to be difference of opinion. And as you can see, all three of us get on here and we have a difference of opinion, but it's the ability to actually discuss it, right? I'm not going to get off this call and be like, man, I can't stand Andrew. Pierre be getting on my nerves. Like,
I think you did that. Don't do that. You was ready to quit.
I'm gonna get off this call. When I get off this call, I got a much more fond respect for you, right? Because what you just really showed me was you willing to walk through the fire with me,
right?
And you willing to have that hard conversation and that dialogue, and in the end, we still gonna walk away brothers.
Absolutely,
I love that.
All right, Pete, take us out of here, man.
Man, I want to thank y'all for joining us tonight, man. This is Culture Uncut, where we always keep the culture uncut. Andrew Nelson, Nasir Young, Holmes with Nasir. I appreciate y'all brothers for being here with me. I appreciate y'all brothers for taking the time out of your busy schedules to do this podcast. We want to reclaim and rebuild Chester. We want to help whoever wants to help us. We want to rebuild our school district. We want to rebuild the homes. We want to rebuild the young black men in our community, right? However that works, honestly, right? We can do it. We have enough people that have education. We have enough brothers that want to see a different Chester. I know this for a fact. So let's get it done. Even though Nas look like, I'm gonna get you one of them numbers to hold up like that, because that's where you leaned all the way back. I said, oh,
it kind of looked like a mugshot a little bit.
Right, it definitely looked like a mugshot. So I don't want you leaning all the way. You got the ball hit. I'm like, I ain't want to.
That's crazy. It's the white background, huh?
Yeah, it is. You gotta get one of them culture. You feel me? Not Andrew ain't sent it to you.
I think he did, man. But I am the worst when it comes to technology. I am. I really am. I accept that.
No, but I appreciate y'all brothers, man, for having this conversation, for taking the time out to do it. And whoever else wants to be a guest, man, just hit us up, man. Like we welcome different people coming in and bringing different ways of thinking, different ways of looking at our problems. Let's make sure we're able to come up with some solutions, though. Right.
And I specifically want to build with the brother Keith Muhammad. Right. I'm putting that out there. That's one of my personal desires. I got a lot of respect for that brother. Very much so.
Well, Keith Muhammad, you feel me, brother Tom Outland, these are my brothers, right? So I don't have no problem with hitting him up and seeing if he got some time next Wednesday. We can see what we can get from that. Tom, if you are free, I would love for you to be a guest as well.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, fellas, this is the end of the show. I want y'all brothers to be safe. Holla at you.
All right. More.
Peace.